Kentaro Miura's seminal entry into the dark fantasy genre, Berserk, has captivated audiences ever since its first publication in 1989 for over 3 decades now. Over this time, Berserk has gone on to not just establish itself as a juggernaut of the industry, it also managed to inspire some of your favorite manga and anime series. Its impact reverberates across time and space, making it one of the most recognizable franchises in the world. Through Miura's expert storytelling and artistry, it tells a captivating tale of vengeance, redemption, and one man's stand against an inescapable destiny. Berserk isn't just about violence and gore, it's also about the quieter moments that hold huge emotional depth with regard to the story. It explores profound human themes of loneliness, mental health, and existential crisis, which are highlighted through its depictions of a brutal, unforgiving world and the denizens that dwell in it. Over the years, Berserk has received a number of anime adaptations, all of which cover fragmented parts of the story. The series has never been adapted into an anime in its entirety, starting with the most popular and iconic adaptation from 1997 that ran for 25 episodes between October 8, 1997 and April 1, 1998. This adaptation covered the Golden Age arc of the manga. This is considered by many to still be the best adaptation of the manga to date. We would later get another anime adaptation between 2012 and 2013 in the form of a trilogy of films that would once again mostly cover the events of the Golden Age arc. Berserk would receive another anime adaptation between 2016 and 2017. The first season of this adaptation would be 12 episodes long and would cover the Conviction arc, or at least that's what was advertised on paper. More on this later, while its second season covers the first half of the Falcon of the Millennium arc. The topic of our video is this particular anime adaptation, as we seek to explore why, despite such promise and hype, it fell flat on its face, disappointing fans who had been waiting for such a long time for an anime adaptation of the Conviction arc in particular. From incompetent production teams to horrible animation and sound design, what was supposed to be a modern adaptation of this iconic series turned into a complete nightmare instead. It was lambasted by most fans and critiqued for its poor execution of such an iconic franchise. Today, we present to you what really went down to make Berserk 2016 such a ginormous letdown despite proclaiming lofty promises. With it having been over a decade without any new attempts to adapt this iconic dark fantasy series, fans are more starved than ever for a fresh anime adaptation of Berserk. Therefore, it's extra important that we examine past failures so that the same mistakes might not be repeated in the future. With that being said, let's dive right into this video as we take you on yet another journey through Kentaro Miura's legendary manga as we conduct a detailed post-mortem on Berserk 2016. Let's begin. Atrocious animation and CGI. Considering that the 1997 anime adaptation of the series set the standards so high in terms of animation with its hand-drawn design, fans were rightly expecting the 2016 anime to be at least on par with that. However, what we received was a clunky, soulless animation style thanks to the heavy utilization of 2D and 3D CGI effects. Gone was the fluid hand-drawn animation that made the 1997 anime iconic, and instead, the CGI animation that we received butchered the beautifully detailed artwork of the manga. It was as if somebody had murdered Berserk and had turned up wearing its skin hoping no one would notice. Normally, these CGI techniques were utilized in mecha animes to add that little something extra to their robots, but here, to everyone's dismay, it was used across the board for organic and inorganic stuff that led to even the tiniest movement and expression appearing awkward and stiff. The visual contrast was jarring for people who were expecting a more cohesive and detailed animation, especially for a series with such iconic scenes that have been rendered with so much care in the original medium and the 1997 adaptation. It felt like they wanted to bring something fresh to the table and therefore decided to update things with technology, but unfortunately it didn't mesh well with the tone and atmosphere the Berserk franchise had built. What was especially egregious was how the CGI animation absolutely butchered the fight scenes in the series. Thanks to the CGI, it felt like the battle scenes totally lost their gravitas. These scenes required dynamically fluid transitions between animation frames, which is quite simply impossible to pull off using this shoddily applied method of transitioning between 2D and 3D. The transitions between the 2D and 3D animation are extremely jarring, making it an unpleasant viewing experience. It makes the entire series feel choppy, making it look like the production crew were trying to cut costs by employing such a method instead of it being an artistic choice. This style of animation completely ruins any emotional weight that the series has to offer, as crucial expressions are rendered in the most farcical manner. We think this is the millionth time we've said this, but the characters just look so stiff and unnatural, making them impossible to relate with. There is a huge visual disconnect that this style of animation invokes, quickly resulting in the audience losing any interest in the series. Even the quality of the CG used is abysmal. While all of these flaws are true and real, there could still be some hope if the CGI itself was of extremely high quality, but it seems like they used the cheapest, most experimental form of CGI to make this series. If this was indeed the case, then it was a massive error in judgment to use such technology to render one of the most beloved and iconic anime series of all time. Rushed and incomplete storytelling. As if having a shoddy and unwanted style of animation wasn't enough, the creators showed their complete lack of understanding of Berserk with the way they presented the story. The entire plot feels rushed, jumping from one action scene to the next, as if they thought that's all that made Berserk appealing to the audience. We know that Miura's original source material contains quite a lot of moments that the characters experience. These scenes are often critical, not just for the pacing of the story, but they also offer moments of introspection during which a lot of character development happens. They also serve to grant the audience a deeper peek into the psyches of the characters, making them even more emotionally invested in the overall story. All of this is removed for action sequences that have been animated in their nauseating CGI technique that fully kills the vibe of the series. We also have to point out how this trend of disrespecting the source continues with how they condense and cramp more than a couple of chapters of the manga into a single episode, making it feel extremely rushed. Further, characters aren't introduced in the same order as in the manga. Isidro, Puck, Serpico, and Farnace are all introduced in the very first episode. This makes it overwhelming for new fans, as there are just too many noteworthy characters that they have to deal with at once. By pacing the introduction of these characters properly, the audience is allowed ample time to connect and understand them properly. The way things were handled in the 2016 anime denies the audience the opportunity to do this entirely, greatly reducing the impact of these characters, which further dilutes the entire narrative. And if you thought that was it, think again, as they weren't done butchering the storyline just yet. You know the Lost Children sub-arc from the Conviction arc? Apparently the creators hadn't heard of it, as it simply doesn't exist in the anime. We realized that that arc deals with some extremely difficult scenes, including violence in regards to children. However, for anyone who has read the manga, that arc isn't there for shock value. It's one of the most emotionally charged arcs, as it tells the extremely tragic tale of innocence lost in this world governed by causality. It challenged Guts' quest for vengeance, asking the question just how far is he willing to go to achieve it. The arc really drives home the point that causality spares no one, and even children are made victims of its cruelty and malice. Further, if you're going to animate a series like Berserk, these scenes of graphic violence and unsettling themes simply come with the territory. This was never a show meant for children to watch, so who's the censorship for? It just highlights the incompetence of the people behind the anime. If they were unable to do the arc one for one, then they should have found a way to present it in a sensible and logical order. What they end up doing instead is leaving a massive hole in the plot that just left a bitter taste in the mouths of existing fans of the series. While it makes no allies out of the existing fandom, it's a poor introductory piece of work to people looking to get into the series as well, thanks to its careless handling of the story. We know how Miura has painstakingly created a detailed world, none of which is explored here, as the anime glosses over key plot points with little to no explanation. To make up for their sacrifice of the world building, character development, and poor pacing, the anime relies heavily on awkward exposition dumps and poorly integrated rapid flashbacks which backfire grandly. Overall, this adaptation of the anime is stripped of any emotional weight and severely undermines what made the 1997 adaptation and the manga such generational classics. Production issues. A mess of this proportion is rarely a single person's fault, and it's no surprise at all when we delve into the production history of the 2016 anime, a much more complicated picture begins to emerge. From the onset, there were several red flags regarding the production of this series that one can quite clearly see in hindsight. To begin with, this series was made by 3 studios working together, and while this isn't a new phenomenon, it leaves a lot of room for disagreements and poor execution, which was sadly the case here. The 3 studios involved were Leiden Films, Gemba, and Milla Pensi. Of the 3, Leiden Films was the main studio and therefore handled most of the production-related things, while Gemba had never actually worked on an entire anime by themselves. In fact, they were a company that was often subcontracted to handle the CGI bits in other animes. Millie Pensy, on the other hand, was a company that was widely known for making slice-of-life animes, which don't exactly push the boundaries in terms of animation. What all of these companies had in common, however, was their severe inexperience in making fluid action-based anime, which led them to clash on multiple occasions regarding the direction the show's animation should take. Not only did this consume valuable resources and time, it also didn't resolve the confusion regarding the final product that was supposed to come out soon. In fact, the disagreements were so intense that it wasn't until December of that year that a compromise was reached between the three parties, by which time they had already scrapped almost everything that they had promised to fans in the trailer that had been released in August. Due to having wasted time in arguing about the direction of the series, the creators were faced with extremely tight deadlines and budget that greatly compromised the overall quality of the series. The anime was marketed as the first ever full continuation of the Golden Age arc, and as we know from the previous section, to say that they underdelivered would be an understatement. To compound even more misery upon this hellish production, they brought in Shin Itagaki to helm the project as director. Itagaki was by no means a novice, having worked on the Devil May Cry OVA series, Gurren Lagann, Lupin, and Inuyasha. The problem really lay in the fact that these series were all 2D animated series, and this was his first time dabbling with 3D animation, which meant that he was extremely inexperienced in this medium. This proved to be too much of a jump for Itagaki, as the rules of 2D and 3D animation don't always align, and what works wonderfully for the latter can be disastrous when applied to the former, which is what ended up happening, leading to extremely poorly placed cameras in an attempt to shoot elaborate shots that distract from the action at hand, making the scene extremely confusing instead of just keeping stuff simple. For his first rodeo with CGI and 3D techniques, Berserk proved to be too much for Itagaki, resulting in the creation of what was essentially a dumpster fire. This has to be undoubtedly one of the lowest points in his career. The sound design, which was handled by another veteran of the industry, Yuri Tamura, did not face any better. The idea was to give the sounds of this world a proper feeling, but what it managed to do was overblow everything to the point that it sounded jarring to listen to. The sound layering was downright horrendous, spawning memes all over the internet about it. This is, of course, not to say that the soundtrack itself was bad as well. The OST was the only shining beacon of light in this troubled production cycle for this largely underwhelming series. Due to the number of players involved in its production, the crews were divided into several small groups, due to which there was a huge gap in communication and teamwork. Each group tried to push their ideas through, resulting in friction and a clear downgrade in quality. This was a classic case of too many cooks spoiling the broth. The production team was overall way over their head, having something so iconic and intricately crafted as Berserk as their first real foray into this type of anime. They failed spectacularly in delivering what they hyped up to be the best animated adaptation of Berserk to have ever come out. Sound design and editing flaws. Having briefly touched on the flawed sound design of the series, let's now continue to explore this facet of the 2016 anime. As mentioned, the sound design was being handled by industry veteran Yuri Tamura, and that led to expectations being extremely high in this department as well. There was a distinct lack of subtlety and sophistication, and the sound design never quite managed to hit the sweet spot, and it was either too underwhelming or overblown. The infamous clang of Guts' Dragon Slayer immediately comes to mind, as it has spawned several internet memes that will never let Tamura and his team live this fiasco down. This constant mess with regards to sound design pops up especially during combat scenes, of which this anime is full. It removes the sense of gravitas that these battles have, making them feel hollow and artificial, completely breaking the audience's immersion. Guts slashing down apostles should sound visceral and brutal. Instead, the sound design grants it the same impact you get when hitting cardboard with a broom. While we understand the world of Berserk is supposed to have a heavy and grim atmosphere, nowhere in the memo does it say that it's supposed to sound lifeless. There's a distinct lack of quality in background details like the sounds of wind, the murmur of crowds, or even the crackling of a campfire, making the entire world feel empty and soulless, which is such a shame, because we know how detailed Miura's depiction of Berserk's world is in his manga. There is a distinct overuse of sound bites with repetitive growls of monsters and identical groans from different characters, making the entire anime feel cheap and rushed. Even the haunting score by Shiro Sagisu, while offering the only bright spark in the otherwise abysmal sound department, is used too repeatedly, even in scenes where it doesn't fit the emotional tone. There are scenes which called for silence or subtlety, but the sound design team, just like the rest of the production team, seem to have zero idea what Berserk is actually about and blast overtly dramatic music that really doesn't fit the scene. While this might all feel a bit nitpicky, it is important to highlight this as it greatly contributes to the final product that we received later on. In a series that's as charged and complex as Berserk, sound is essential to granting audiences an understanding regarding the scale of things, the dread that permeates the atmosphere, and the depth of emotion that this series is replete with. When the sound design is weak, it compounds the poor animation and directorial choices, making the 2016 adaptation feel like a low-effort production rather than the masterpiece it was touted to be. Reasons the 2016 Berserk is inferior to the 1997 adaptation. The 1997 adaptation, despite coming out almost 19 years before 2016 Berserk, is still considered to be the superior adaptation by fans and critics for numerous reasons. Unlike the 2016 adaptation, Berserk 1997 is hand-drawn, which allows it to faithfully render the gritty and grounded artwork that matches the manga's darker tone. Though limited in regards to their budget, their visual style is consistent, and it doesn't chop and change between two different styles like the later version. This allows it to maintain an atmospheric world that properly reflects Miura's vision, allowing audiences to get easily immersed. Its hand-drawn technique allows it to effectively use things like shadows and lighting to convey mood and tension permeating throughout the series. Unlike the frantic pacing of Berserk 2016, the older adaptation allows the scenes to breathe, which is important in a series where the characters heavily drive the narrative of the plot. It also shows a level of reverence to the original source material instead of the blatant disrespect shown by the disregard they had for the original pacing and material in the newer show. Almost everything that the 2016 series gets wrong, from the production to the anime to the sound design and storytelling, the older anime adaptation gets spot on. That's not to say that it's without flaws, but those flaws feel like aberrations when compared to the things that the 2016 version gets wrong. In conclusion, the 1997 anime is a product of passion and artistic respect, even with technical limitations. It captures the soul of Berserk. The 2016 version, though more ambitious in scope, feels like a missed opportunity due to weak animation, poor direction, and tonal dissonance. Marvelous verdict! While the intent to continue Miura's tale in an anime form beyond the Golden Age arc was commendable, everything else regarding Berserk 2016 was less so. By deciding to take on the Conviction arc and the Black Swords Man arc, the creators really raised expectations regarding the show, as both of these arcs can be considered to be fan favorites. Due to this, when they failed to live up to expectations, the resulting backlash was equally severe. What was meant to be a New Age adaptation of one of the most iconic dark fantasy series to have ever come out ended up becoming one of its weakest renditions. From being mired in production hell to extremely poor understanding of the source material they were working with, Berserk 2016 was doomed to fail right from the onset. Its over-reliance on underdeveloped CGI results in stiff, awkward animation that fails to capture the brutal, visceral tone of Kentaro Miura's masterpiece. Inconsistencies between 2D and 3D animation, choppy frame rates, and emotionless character expressions strip away the intensity and nuance that define Berserk's world. Berserk 2016 is a subpar adaptation not because it dared to continue a difficult and ambitious story, but because it did so without the technical skill, narrative sensitivity, or artistic vision required to pull off such a feat. Instead of enhancing the legacy of Berserk, it highlights how even the greatest stories can falter when entrusted to studios and teams unprepared to handle their depth and gravity. Meanwhile, we can only wait and hope that one day we'll get the perfect Berserk anime, not just for us fans, but for Kentaro Miura's legacy, as he surely deserves one. Until we arrive at such a time in the temporal flow, we must struggle on. Thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this video. If you liked it, be sure to check out the rest of our channel where we post daily videos about all your favorite animes and mangas. For now, though, it's time to say goodbye. We hope to see you soon in the next one, but until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.